All right. Well, welcome everybody to my kitchen. I know we did a little switch around. This is just a little bit of a taste of what our cooking demonstrations look like here at Unite for Her. So we do them, like I said, 4 times a month. We also have random cooking demos throughout for different celebrations or holidays and what have you. Those cooking demos are for an hour long. This cooking demo will just be a little bit of a taste, but like I said, I'll be making the Anytime bars, which are page 125 in your Cancer Fighting Kitchen cookbook. So if you happen to have that, feel free to get it out, flip to the page just so that you can see and reference what I'm talking about. I have my oven preheated to 325. So we'll see the process of how to make these Anytime bars, and then we'll get to see the finished product, which is always a fun treat. So to start, you're gonna need a food processor or a blender, but I will say you can make this recipe without it. So if you don't have a food processor or a blender, if you're able to finely chop all these ingredients, we'll have some nuts, some dried fruit. You can mix it together that way and it still makes a delicious bar. These Anytime bars are a great treat that utilizes some of our plant foods that I think we don't think of as much. So we've talked about how plant foods are so beneficial for our nutrition. They're all going to provide different nutritional capacity. And one of the things that we're really focusing in on today are our nuts and our seeds. So I think most of us, when we think of plant foods, we think of fruits and veggies, but nuts and seeds are just as important when we think about our plant food groups. They're going to have protein, omega-3 fatty acids, which are going to support heart health and joint health and reduce inflammation. So these can be a great thing to snack on, especially when you're looking for a sweet treat or something like that to grab in the middle of the day to give you some extra energy. So to start, I have my large blender here. I'm going to put in the first couple ingredients and we're going to do a couple different pulses as I add ingredients. So I'm going to put in 4 tablespoons of, I have almond flour here. You could use whatever type of flour you have on hand. The reason I'm using almond flour simply is because I like the flavor of the almond with all the nuts that are involved as well. You could always do just regular all-purpose flour. You could use coconut flour, you could use gluten-free flour, whatever you have on hand. So I've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, and then I'm gonna add in some ground flax seeds. So if you only have whole flax seeds, that's okay. Give them a little pulse ahead of time so that you grind them up in advance. You're going to get the biggest bang for your buck nutrition-wise if you grind up the flax seeds in advance, because flax seeds are similar to corn in the fact that our bodies just don't digest them very well. So when we have whole flax seeds and we eat them in that format, they're going to add bulk to our GI tract, but we might not be able to absorb as many of the nutrients from them since they're passing through us. So it's always a good practice just to grind them up in advance. All right, we've got our flour and our flax seeds. Then I'm going to put in a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So I have a little 1/8 teaspoon measure here, so I'll do 1 and 2. I'm going to add in then 1/8 teaspoon of both baking powder and baking soda. So these just help with sticking together. There's I guess you could say a soft little rise in them when they cook, but nothing crazy like bread or muffins or anything like that. Just helps to make them nice and aerated while we cook them. All right, so that was our baking powder and here's our baking soda. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take these couple ingredients and I'm just gonna pulse them a couple of times in the blender, just so that they're all mixed together. All right. Okay, perfect. So now we have a nice mix. You probably can't see it very much, but of our flour, our seeds, and then some of our baking agents. Now we're going to add, very important piece, the nuts. So the recipe calls for pecans and almonds. So what I did is I put the oven on 350 and I toasted them in the oven. That helps to release some of the oils, gives them a really nice toasted flavor. And I think it just adds a little bit more to the recipe. If you don't have the time to toast them, that's okay. Or if you're thinking, I don't like almonds or I don't like pecans, you could always swap it. Something like a walnut would work well, or a cashew you could certainly use instead. So what I'm gonna do, I have a cup here of each. I'm actually just gonna take my baking sheet. I'm gonna dump these in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pulse these until they have a nice chop in them. So I'll put my blender on and I'm going to pulse it a couple times. I would say 5, 10, until they're coming up to a nice kind of fine dice. You could certainly have larger pieces or smaller pieces, whatever your preference is, but I'll go ahead and start pulsing. I did about 5 pulses and now my nuts are at a nice small consistency. I'll show you. So our nuts are in much smaller bits now instead of those large pieces of nut. Now we're going to put in some dried fruit to help kind of suck everything together and keep it nice and compact. So we're going to put in a cup of dried apricots. So I have those here and I'll measure out a cup. I always say in the kitchen, you're a little bit, loosey-goosey with it. For example, this is pretty much full, but there are 2 apricots left in here. So I'm just gonna toss those in there. I'll put in my other cup, and then I need a cup of dates. So these dates I got from the baking section at the store. You might see dates in the produce aisle, medjool dates. Those are a great option too. The only thing just to be mindful of is when you get them from the produce section, those medjool dates, they usually have pits in them. So make sure those pits are removed. This has removed pits, so we don't have to worry about that. All right, and then I'm gonna put in also just a 1/4 cup of oats. Oats, and even those apricots and dates are also plant foods. Oats is another plant food. It's a whole grain, so it's going to give us some fiber to support our GI health. These bars are a great powerhouse of nutrition, especially when we're not feeling our best, or maybe not everything is palatable to us. The nice sweet flavor helps, but we're still getting in a ton of nutrition, even though it's kind of a nice tasty treat. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put my lid on. This time I'm going to pulse it a couple more times because I do really want all of the apricots and the dates to kind of smush together, chop into bits so that they blend up. So let's give it about 10 or so pulses. All right, last one. Perfect. So I'll show you what it looks like. It looks a lot more moisturized than it did before. So now we have a lot more filling in here. There's little chunks that I can see, I know, of apricots and our dates in there as well. Now, I will say this is a part you can kind of play with a little. So if you are thinking, wow, I'd really like to add X, Y, or Z, go ahead and add it. If you want to add some raisins, if you want to add some shredded coconut, that would be a great option as well. I think there's so many things that you could put into this to really make it your own and make the flavors delicious. All right, I'm all done with blending, so I moved my blender to the side. I'm actually going to move this to the side as well. We're going to get a large size bowl, and you're going to take 1 egg. I'm going to crack it. I'm going to go ahead and put the egg in here. I am all about food safety, so I'm also just going to go ahead and wash my hands now that I cracked an egg. All right, and I'm going to add to my egg a teaspoon of vanilla extract. This adds a nice flavor. If you have a different type of extract, maple extract, almond extract, you could certainly do that as well. All right, and then I'm going to add, I have in here 5 tablespoons, just being careful so I don't spill it yet, 5 tablespoons of pure maple syrup. You could certainly use honey as well. You could put in less sweetener if you want, whatever is really your preference. And I'm gonna go ahead and give it a nice whisk so that it's all mixed together. All right, so now that that's all nice and whisked together, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to take all of these dry ingredients. I'm gonna take the blender blade out and I'm gonna pour them on top to mix it together. And then this is the part where, you know, you could certainly use a spoon, a wooden spoon, you know, a spatula. I'm all for just kind of going in, you know, with your hands to mix it. Before I go ahead and mix it, I want to grease my pan. So I have a 9x9 pan here. What I'm going to do to grease it, because I don't have any cooking spray, I ran out of my cooking spray. I have some olive oil here. I'm just going to put a little tiny bit. And then this is my secret hack that I like to do in the kitchen if I run out of oil. I put a little bit in the pan and then I just take a paper towel and I use that to spread it out on the sides and the bottom. Seems to do the trick every single time. So I'm going to keep doing that as long as I, you know, keep forgetting to get cooking spray. All right, so I have that nice and greased. Now I'm going to go in and go ahead and mix this up. You want it to just be combined. You know, you want to make sure there's not any of that egg mixture left. So I'm going to go ahead and mix it together, just trying to make sure that it's all sticking together. All right, so perfect. Certainly doesn't have to be any specific, you know, texture, consistency, just as you get it a little bit mixed. This is what it looks like after it's mixed. It almost looks like granola, but it's a lot of nuts in there. We do have our oats. We've got our dried fruit. So I'm going to pour it into my greased pan. And then I'm just going to squish it down until it's a nice even-ish layer throughout the pan. So I'm going to squish it down from all sides. All right. You could definitely use, you know, if you have like a small roller or if you have anything flat, you can use that to help you kind of squish it out in the pan too. Sometimes I like to top it with some additional dried fruit if you want. That's a good way to go about it. All right, and there are our anytime bars ready to be baked. So let me give my hand a little rinse. And we're gonna go ahead and put these in the oven at 325 for about 25 to 30 minutes. So I'll go ahead, put those in the oven, and I'll set my timer for 25 minutes. Now, we're not gonna all wait for 25 minutes. I did cook a batch ahead of time. So I have my anytime bars here. I made them last night. Definitely make sure to let them cool before you go ahead and cut them. But this is what they look like when they're cooked. They pretty much look the same, but you can see there's some nice brown edges around the side. I'm just gonna go ahead and cut out one piece just to show you what it looks like. So I'm gonna give it a nice slice. The recipe says to cut it in a 5x5 grid. So you would get about 25 squares out of it. If you wanna put less or more, you know, whatever works for you. So here are our delicious anytime bars. I'll show you what they look like. They look so good. They have all of that nutrition packed in there, and they're a beautiful sweet treat to have, whether it's during treatment, when you come home for a snack in the evening. They freeze for up to 2 months, or you can keep them on the counter for about 5 to 7 days. So certainly something to add to your cooking arsenal if you're looking for snack recipes. But I hope everybody enjoyed just a little bit of a taste of what our cooking demos can look like.